You've come seeking answers to the question that haunts every breathing soul. What happens when the last breath leaves your lungs? When your heart falls silent and the world you know dissolves into memory? Do you simply cease, scattered like dust in an indifferent wind? Or do you step through doorways that your living mind cannot even imagine? Listen carefully, seeker of truths. Today we descend into the most profound mystery ever committed to text, the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But understand this, we are not merely discussing death. We are exploring the architecture of consciousness itself, the blueprint of what it means to exist beyond the boundaries of flesh and bone. This is not a gentle journey. The path we walk today will strip away your comfortable assumptions about reality, about self, about the very nature of what you call you. Are you prepared to discover that everything you thought you knew about death and life might be nothing more than shadows on the wall of a cave you've never realized you were trapped within? The Bardo Thodol was born from the vision of a man who walked between worlds. Padmasambhava, a name that means lotus-born, was no ordinary monk shuffling through monastery halls. He was a Mahasiddha, a master of the impossible, wielding powers that would make your modern miracles look like parlor tricks. Born in the mystical landscapes of 8th century India, he carried within him the accumulated wisdom of lifetimes, the kind of knowing that comes not from books, but from direct confrontation with the ultimate nature of reality. When King Trisong Detsen summoned him to Tibet, it was not merely to spread Buddhism, it was to wage spiritual war. Tibet in those days was a battleground of beliefs. Shamanic practices clashed with animist traditions, while the ancient Bon religion held the land in its mystical grip. Local spirits and deities fought against foreign intrusion like antibodies attacking a virus. But Padmasambhava did not come to destroy these forces. He came to transform them, to weave them into something greater than the sum of their parts. Through tantric ritualism and magical knowledge that defied comprehension, he tamed the wild spirits of Tibet, integrating them into a new spiritual synthesis. This was not conquest, it was alchemy, the transformation of base metal into gold. He founded Sami Monastery, Tibet's first Buddhist sanctuary, but more than that, he planted seeds of understanding that would grow into one of humanity's most sophisticated maps of consciousness. But why did this master of the mystical arts turn his attention to death? Because he understood something that escapes most spiritual teachers, that the moment of death is not the end of opportunity, it is the beginning of the greatest opportunity. At death, when the distractions of physical existence fall away like discarded clothes, the mind achieves a clarity impossible in life. It becomes receptive to truths that the living mind, clouded by endless desires and fears, cannot grasp. Yet Padmasambhava also knew that most souls, when faced with this ultimate moment, become lost in their own illusions. Like travelers in a foreign land without a map, they wander through landscapes of their own making, never recognizing the clear light of liberation that shines before them. His compassion moved him to create more than just a text. He crafted a guide, a voice that could speak to the dying and the dead, offering direction when all familiar landmarks have disappeared. This was revolutionary thinking. While most religions speak of death as judgment or ending, the Bardo Thodol presents it as education, as the final and most crucial lesson in the curriculum of existence. Death becomes not the enemy to be feared, but the teacher to be embraced. But let us be clear about what we mean by Bardos. These are not places you go to. They are states of consciousness you become. The word Bardo means gap or interval, the space between one state and another. And in that space, everything becomes possible, including the ultimate liberation from the wheel of rebirth itself. Imagine, if you can, the moment when your body begins its final surrender, not the Hollywood version with dramatic last words and orchestral music, but the reality, the gradual dissolution of everything you have called yourself. Your senses dim one by one. Touch fades first, then taste, smell, sight, and finally hearing. The elements that compose your physical form, earth, water, fire, air, begin their slow retreat, like actors leaving a stage after the final curtain. This is the Chikai Bardo, and it is here that the first and greatest opportunity for liberation presents itself. As the last threads connecting consciousness to body snap like worn rope, something extraordinary happens. The mind, freed from its biological prison, encounters the clear light, a radiance so pure, so absolute, that human language crumbles trying to describe it. This is not the light you see with your eyes. This is the light that sees. It is consciousness recognizing itself without the filters of ego, memory, or identity. Some traditions call it the higher self. Others know it as the solar mind. The names matter less than the reality. This is the face of the divine looking back at you from your own being. For the prepared soul, this moment offers instant enlightenment, not the gradual awakening that comes from years of meditation and study, but sudden, complete liberation. If you can recognize this clear light as your own true nature, not something foreign or external, but the very essence of what you have always been, then the cycle of rebirth ends. There is no more wandering through the Bardos, no more taking on new bodies, no more suffering. There is only the infinite peace of union with the Absolute. But here lies the tragedy that Padmasambhava witnessed again and again. Most souls, when confronted with this ultimate reality, recoil in terror. The clear light is too pure, too vast, too unlike anything they have known in their limited existence. Like prisoners who have lived so long in darkness that sunlight burns their eyes, they retreat from their own liberation. They choose the familiar prison of separateness over the terrifying freedom of unity. This retreat is not a moral failure. It is the natural response of a consciousness that has spent lifetimes identifying with limitation. The ego mind, even in death, clings to what it knows. It interprets the clear light not as homecoming but as annihilation. And in that misinterpretation, it condemns itself to continue the journey through increasingly complex and distorted realms of its own making. The author Bardo Thodol teaches that this moment of encounter with the clear light lasts for a duration that cannot be measured in earthly time. It exists in the eternal present, where all possibilities remain open. Yet for most, this eternity passes in what seems like an instant of confusion and fear. They turn away from the light and tumble deeper into the labyrinth of consciousness, where the next stage awaits. As Carl Jung once observed, gods and demons are projections of the unconscious, powerful, inescapable, and terrifyingly real until we understand them as aspects of ourselves. The Chonyad Bardo is where this truth becomes lived experience, where the soul finds itself cast as both audience and performer in the ultimate theater of mind. Stripped of physical form, consciousness now exists in a realm where thought becomes reality with lightning speed. Every suppressed emotion, every unfulfilled desire, every fear you've carried across lifetimes, they all emerge now as vivid, tangible presences. This is not metaphor. In this state, the boundary between inner and outer experience dissolves completely. What you think, you become. What you fear, you encounter. What you love, you merge with. The visions that arise in this Bardo follow a pattern that reveals the deep architecture of consciousness itself. They begin with the peaceful deities, radiant beings that embody the enlightened aspects of your own nature. These may appear as Buddhas emanating compassion, bodhisattvas offering wisdom, or deities of light that pulse with love beyond human comprehension. They are beautiful beyond description, yet their beauty carries a weight that can overwhelm the unprepared mind. These peaceful visions are not separate entities coming to judge or rescue you. They are your own Buddha nature made visible, the enlightened potential that has always existed within you but remained hidden beneath layers of conditioning and ignorance. They offer a second chance at liberation. If you can recognize them as aspects of your own true self, you can merge with them and achieve enlightenment. But recognition requires a kind of spiritual maturity that few possess. Most souls encountering these divine presences feel unworthy or confused. The visions seem too pure, too perfect to have anything to do with their flawed and limited self-concept. They doubt, they hesitate, they pull back, and in doing so, They invite the next wave of manifestations. The wrathful deities arrive like storms made of consciousness itself. These are the same enlightened energies as the peaceful deities, but now appearing in their fierce, transformative aspect. They manifest as beings of terrifying power, multi-armed, flame-wreathed entities with bulging eyes and bared fangs, surrounded by the energy of cosmic destruction. They are not evil, but they appear evil to the mind that has rejected its own divine nature. These wrathful forms represent the untamed aspects of your psyche, the anger you've suppressed, the desires you've denied, the shadow elements you've refused to integrate. They are frightening because they show you the volcanic power that lies beneath your civilized surface. Yet paradoxically, they too offer liberation. If you can see through their terrifying appearance, to recognize them as expressions of enlightened energy, if you can embrace rather than flee from these aspects of yourself, they become gateways to freedom. The key teaching of the Chonyid Bardo is that all these visions, peaceful and wrathful alike, are empty of inherent existence. They are projections of mind, no more solid than dreams, no more permanent than clouds. This concept, shunyata or emptiness, is not nihilism. It is the recognition that phenomena arise and pass away without fixed essence, that even the most vivid experiences are ultimately insubstantial. Understanding emptiness while in the midst of overwhelming visions requires a special kind of courage. You must be willing to stand in the hurricane of your own mind without being swept away by it. You must learn to observe without attachment, to experience without identification. This is why the Bardo Thodol emphasizes that spiritual practice in life is crucial. Meditation, contemplation of impermanence, and study of emptiness build the mental muscles needed for this ultimate test. Fear and attachment are the twin guardians that keep souls trapped in this stage. Fear makes you run from the wrathful deities instead of recognizing them as aspects of enlightenment. Attachment makes you cling to the peaceful visions instead of seeing through them to the clear light beyond. Both responses keep you bound to the wheel of becoming. Ensure that you will continue the journey to rebirth rather than achieving liberation. The Chonyid Bardo is described as lasting up to 14 days in human time, though time itself becomes fluid in this realm. For 14 days, consciousness experiences this theater of projections, this kaleidoscope of its own making. Each day brings new opportunities for recognition and liberation. Each day the visions become more intense, more personalized, more directly related to the specific karmic patterns of the individual soul. Some souls, particularly those with advanced spiritual development, navigate this stage with wisdom and detachment. They see the visions for what they are, temporary manifestations of consciousness exploring its own nature. They neither flee in terror nor grasp in desire. Instead, they remain centered in awareness itself, recognizing all experiences as displays of the clear light. For them, even this stage can become a doorway to enlightenment. But for most, the intensity of the Chonyid Bardo becomes overwhelming. The visions seem too real, too urgent, too personally significant to dismiss as mere mental projections. The soul becomes lost in the drama of its own making, reacting to its projections as if they were external realities. And in this confusion, it prepares for the final descent into the third Bardo, where the pull toward new embodiment becomes irresistible. You have journeyed through the dissolution of death and witnessed the theater of your own mind. Now comes the final test, the ultimate choice point that will determine your next chapter in the endless book of existence. The Tibetan Bardo is where karma reveals its true face, not as punishment or reward, but as the inexorable law of spiritual gravity that draws like to like, consciousness to the experiences it needs for growth. Entering this Bardo, the soul carries with it the accumulated energy of every thought, word, and deed across countless lifetimes. This is not mere moral bookkeeping. Karma operates more like a magnetic field, with each action creating subtle impressions that shape the soul's fundamental orientation toward existence. These karmic seeds now begin to sprout, generating powerful attractions toward specific types of rebirth. The Tibetan Bardo presents consciousness with a series of visions that seem as real as any earthly experience. The soul witnesses couples in union, sees various realms of existence, some bright and appealing, others dark and forbidding. These are not random scenes, but precisely calibrated manifestations drawn from the soul's own karmic patterns. The frightened soul is drawn toward realms of safety. The angry soul gravitates toward environments of conflict. The greedy soul finds itself attracted to situations of abundance or scarcity, depending on the specific nature of its attachments. This process of attraction happens below the threshold of conscious choice. It is more like the way iron filings align themselves around a magnet, inevitable, automatic, governed by forces deeper than personal will. The soul does not rationally decide where to be reborn. Instead, it is drawn by currents of energy that reflect its deepest conditioning, its most fundamental orientation toward reality. Yet even here, at this final stage, liberation remains possible. The Bardo Thodol teaches that if the soul can maintain awareness and detachment during these visions of rebirth, if it can recognize these scenes as projections of its own mind, rather than external realities demanding participation, it can still choose the path of enlightenment over the path of reincarnation. This requires extraordinary spiritual development. The pull toward rebirth is described as almost irresistible, like a traveler who has wandered for days in the desert and suddenly sees an oasis. The soul, exhausted by its journey through death and the Bardos, yearns for the security and familiarity of embodied existence. The prospect of once again having a body, senses, a solid sense of identity, becomes overwhelmingly appealing. The choice of specific rebirth reflects the soul's current level of spiritual development and the lessons it still needs to learn. 8. Consciousness dominated by anger might be drawn toward a birth where it will experience the consequences of rage, perhaps as both perpetrator and victim of violence. A soul trapped in materialism might find itself in circumstances of either great wealth or desperate poverty, depending on which experience will most effectively teach the futility of attachment to possessions. This is not punishment, but education. Each rebirth is precisely calibrated to provide the experiences necessary for the soul's continued evolution. The universe operates like the most skilled teacher, creating exactly the curriculum each consciousness needs to progress toward ultimate liberation. The tragic irony is that most souls lacking this understanding experience their circumstances as random suffering rather than purposeful learning. The actual moment of rebirth is described as a kind of psychic storm. The soul, overcome by the desire for embodied existence, loses its broader perspective and becomes absorbed in the drama of new life. It sees the coupling that will produce its new body, and driven by karmic attraction and the fundamental confusion that mistakes limitation for security, enters into the process of conception. At this moment, a kind of spiritual amnesia descends. The soul forgets its journey through the Bardos, loses conscious memory of its previous lives, and becomes identified with its new form. The clear light that offered liberation in the Chikai Bardo becomes a distant memory. The lessons of the Chonyad Bardo fade like dreams at dawn. The soul once again takes on the illusion of being a separate, limited individual, beginning another cycle in the wheel of samsara. Yet this forgetting is not absolute. Somewhere in the depths of consciousness, the memory remains. The spiritual traditions speak of this as Buddha nature, the enlightened essence that no amount of incarnation can truly obscure. It lies dormant like a seed in winter, waiting for the right conditions to sprout into awareness. This is why spiritual awakening often feels like remembering rather than learning something new. We are not acquiring enlightenment from outside. We are uncovering the enlightenment that has always been our true nature. The Sidpa Bardo teaches us that preparation for this final test must begin in life. By studying the nature of attachment and desire while still embodied, we can develop the detachment necessary to navigate this stage consciously. Practices like meditation on death, contemplation of impermanence, and cultivation of non-attachment are not morbid exercises but practical training for the ultimate journey. For the soul that can maintain awareness through all three Bardos, that can see through the illusions of death, the projections of mind, and the attractions of rebirth, a different destiny awaits. Instead of being reborn into another cycle of limitation and suffering, such a consciousness can merge completely with the clear light, achieving the ultimate goal of all spiritual striving, permanent liberation from the wheel of birth and death. The I, Bardo Thodol, is far more than an ancient text describing otherworldly states. It is a mirror held up to the nature of consciousness itself, revealing truths about the mind that remain valid whether we believe in literal rebirth or not. The Bardos are not just stages of afterlife experience, they are maps of how consciousness operates at the deepest levels, patterns that repeat in cycles large and small throughout our existence. Consider how the three Bardos mirror the cycles we experience in life. Every night in sleep, we undergo a kind of death as ordinary waking consciousness dissolves. In dreams, we encounter projections of our own mind that seem completely real until we awaken. And each morning we are reborn into the waking state, often carrying no conscious memory of our nocturnal journey. The Bardos are not foreign territories. They are the familiar country of consciousness itself, seen with unprecedented clarity. The clear light that appears at death is the same awareness that witnesses our thoughts and experiences throughout life. It is the I that remains constant while thoughts come and go, emotions rise and fall, and the body changes from childhood to old age. Most of the time, this pure awareness is obscured by the contents of consciousness, our worries, desires, memories, and plans. But in moments of deep meditation, profound beauty, or intense presence, we catch glimpses of this unchanging witness that is our true nature. The visions of the Chonyid Bardo reflect the same projective nature of mind that operates in waking life. The angry person sees enemies everywhere. The fearful person encounters threats in every shadow. The loving person finds beauty in the most unlikely places. Our external experience is constantly being shaped by our internal states, just as the Bardos are shaped by karmic patterns. Understanding this in life allows us to take responsibility for our experience rather than seeing ourselves as victims of external circumstances. The attractions and aversions that drive rebirth in the Sidpa Bardo operate with equal force in our daily choices. We are constantly being drawn toward people, places, and experiences that resonate with our karmic patterns, often repeating the same relationships and scenarios until we learn the lessons they contain. The pull toward new relationships after ending old ones, the tendency to recreate familiar dynamics even when they cause suffering, these are the same forces that drive consciousness toward rebirth. But perhaps the most profound teaching of the Bardo Thodol is its message about the nature of death itself. In a culture that treats death as the ultimate enemy, as failure or tragedy, this ancient text presents a radically different perspective. Death becomes the great revealer, stripping away the illusions that keep us trapped in limited identity, and offering the possibility of recognizing our true nature as boundless consciousness. This recognition transforms not just how we approach death, but how we live. When we understand that consciousness is primary, that awareness is what we truly are rather than what we have, everything changes. The fears that drive so much human suffering begin to lose their grip. The attachments that keep us bound to unsatisfactory patterns start to loosen. We begin to live with the freedom that comes from knowing our essential nature cannot be threatened by any external circumstance. The Bardo Thodol teaches that the ultimate preparation for death is learning to live consciously, to recognize in each moment the clear light of awareness that is our true self. It suggests that enlightenment is not something we achieve after death, but something we can realize right now, in this very instant, by recognizing what we have always been. As the great teacher Ram Dass once asked, "When you die, there is only one question that matters. How much did you love?" But the Bardo Thodol asks an even deeper question. How fully did you recognize what you truly are? Did you see through the illusion of separateness to the unity that underlies all existence? Did you learn to rest in the clear light that shines at the heart of every experience? These are not questions for some distant future moment of judgment. They are the most practical questions we can ask ourselves right now. For the Bardos are not waiting for us in some afterlife. They are here, in the gaps between thoughts, in the spaces between breaths, in the eternal present moment that is the only time we ever truly have. The journey through the Bardos is ultimately the journey home to ourselves. Whether we take it in life or death, whether we complete it in this lifetime or require countless more, the destination remains the same: the recognition of our true nature as the clear light of consciousness itself, unbounded, undying, and free.